would you do if saving your best friend meant signing your own death warrant? January 7th, 1945. The skies over the Philippines were about to witness one of the most tragic decisions in World War II history. Lieutenant Thomas McGuire Jr., known to everyone as Tommy, was already a legend. 38 confirmed kills, the second highest scoring American ace of the entire war. His P-38 Lightning fighter was feared across the Pacific Theater. Japanese pilots knew his name, they knew his plane, and they knew that encountering him meant you probably weren't going home. But on this particular morning, Tommy McGuire wasn't thinking about his reputation or his kill count or his place in the history books. He was thinking about one thing and one thing only: getting his wingman out alive. And that decision, that single moment of loyalty and brotherhood, would cost him everything. Because sometimes the most heroic choice is also the most fatal one. Tommy McGuire's story isn't just about aerial combat or dogfights or military strategy. It's about the price of loyalty. It's about what happens when you refuse to abandon the people you care about, even when every instinct, every rule, every piece of training is screaming at you to save yourself. This is the story of how America's second greatest fighter ace died. Not because he made a tactical error, not because he was outflown by the enemy, but because he loved his brothers in arms too much. And the worst part? He knew what was going to happen. He knew the risks, he knew the odds, and he did it anyway. Let me take you back to the beginning. Thomas Buchanan McGuire Jr. was born on August the 1st, 1920 in Ridgewood, New Jersey. Just a regular American kid growing up in a regular American town. His father died when Tommy was young, leaving his mother Polly to raise him mostly on her own. They moved around a bit, eventually settling in Sebring, Florida, where Tommy spent most of his teenage years. Now, here's the thing about Tommy McGuire. He wasn't some natural-born warrior. He wasn't the biggest kid or the toughest kid or the kid who always picked fights. He was smart, ambitious, driven, the kind of person who saw a goal and went after it with everything he had. In high school, he was president of his class. He played sports. He got good grades. Everyone who knew him said the same thing. Tommy McGuire was going places. When he graduated, he went to the Georgia Institute of Technology to study mechanical engineering. But this was the late 1930s. And the world was changing fast. War was breaking out in Europe, Japan was expanding across Asia, and young men across America were starting to realize, we're probably going to be part of this. Tommy McGuire made his decision in 1940. He dropped out of college and enlisted in the Army Air Corps. He wanted to fly. Not just fly. He wanted to be a fighter pilot, the best of the best. The guys who went up alone against the enemy and came back with victory or didn't come back at all. His mother was terrified. She'd already lost her husband. Now her son was volunteering to go into one of the most dangerous jobs in the entire military. But Tommy had made up his mind. He went through flight training in 1941. And let me tell you, he was good. Not just good. He was exceptional. His instructors noticed it immediately. This kid had instincts. He could read an aircraft like it was part of his own body. He understood angles and speed and positioning in a way that most pilots took years to learn. By the time the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941, Tommy McGuire was already a qualified fighter pilot, and he was ready for war. He was assigned to the 49th Fighter Group and sent to the Pacific Theater in early 1943. His aircraft, the P-38 Lightning. Now, if you don't know about the P-38, let me explain why this plane was so iconic. It had two engines, one on each wing. It had twin tail booms. It was fast. It could climb like a rocket, and it was heavily armed with 4 50-caliber machine guns and one 20mm cannon, all mounted in the nose. No other American fighter had firepower like that. And in the hands of someone like Tommy McGuire, it was lethal. His first kill came on August 18th, 1943. He was flying escort for a bomber mission near Wewak, New Guinea, when Japanese fighters attacked. Tommy dove into the fight, locked onto a Zero, and blasted it out of the sky. That feeling, that first victory, it changed something in him. He'd trained for this moment for years, and now it was real. Now it was life and death, and he was winning. Over the next year and a half, Tommy McGuire became an absolute legend, kill after kill after kill. By the end of 1943, he had 5 confirmed victories, making him an official ace. By mid-1944, he had 20. His tactics were aggressive. Some said too aggressive, but they worked. He would dive into enemy formations alone. He would take on multiple aircraft at once. He seemed to have no fear. Or maybe he just trusted his skills that much. His fellow pilots both admired him and worried about him, because Tommy McGuire didn't just want to be good, he wanted to be the best. There was another ace in the Pacific Theater named Richard Bong, Major Richard Bong, and Bong was the top-scoring American ace with 40 confirmed kills. Tommy McGuire had 38, just 2 behind. And everyone knew Tommy was hunting for those last 2 kills. Not for glory. Well, maybe a little for glory, but mostly because he was competitive. He wanted to prove he was the best fighter pilot in the entire United States military, and he was so close. Now let's talk about January 7th, 1945. The location was Negros Island in the Philippines. The war was going well for the Allies at this point. The Japanese were being pushed back across the Pacific, but they were fighting desperately, and their pilots were still dangerous. Tommy McGuire was leading a 4-plane patrol that morning. With him were 3 other pilots, Captain Edwin Weaver, First Lieutenant Douglas Throp, and Second Lieutenant Fred Champlin. Their mission was simple: fly combat air patrol over the island, protect Allied forces on the ground, and engage any enemy aircraft they encountered. But there was a problem. A decision that Tommy McGuire made before they even took off. His P-38 was equipped with 2 external drop tanks, extra fuel tanks attached under the wings that allowed the plane to fly longer distances. Standard procedure was this: if you got into combat, you immediately jettison those tanks. You drop them, you get rid of them. Why? Because they create drag. They make your plane slower and less maneuverable. In a dogfight, that extra weight and drag can be the difference between life and death. Every pilot knew this. It was basic training. But Tommy McGuire made a choice that morning. He decided not to jettison his tanks if they got into combat. Why? Because he wanted to stay in the air as long as possible. He wanted maximum flight time so he could find the enemy, get those last 2 kills, and beat Richard Bong's record. It was a calculated risk, a gamble, and it was the decision that would kill him. They took off around 8 a.m., 4 P-38 Lightnings climbing into the tropical sky over the Philippines. Beautiful morning, clear visibility, perfect flying weather. For about an hour, nothing happened. They flew their patrol route, they checked in with ground control, they scanned the skies for enemy aircraft, and then, around 9:15 a.m., they spotted them. Japanese fighters, a small group, maybe 3 or 4 aircraft, flying low over the jungle. Tommy McGuire's heart probably started racing. This was it. This was his chance. He radioed his flight. "Bandits below, let's go get them!" And they dove. The 4 American P-38s screamed down out of the sun toward the Japanese planes. But here's what they didn't know. It was a trap. Those Japanese fighters they saw, they were bait. Hidden above them, in the clouds, were more Japanese aircraft. And the moment the Americans committed to the attack, the trap snapped shut. Suddenly there were Japanese fighters everywhere. The sky erupted into chaos. Planes twisting and turning and diving, machine gun fire ripping through the air, radio chatter screaming in everyone's headsets. And in the middle of all this, one of the American pilots, Second Lieutenant Fred Champlin, got into serious trouble. A Japanese fighter got on his tail and would not let go. Champlin was yanking his plane through every evasive maneuver he knew, but this Japanese pilot was good. He stayed right behind him, lining up for the kill shot. Champlin's voice came over the radio, panicked. "I need help! I need help! He's on me! I can't shake him!" And Tommy McGuire heard it. He was in the middle of his own engagement. He had a Japanese plane in his sights. He was seconds away from victory number 39, but he heard his wingman calling for help, and he didn't hesitate. He abandoned his attack, broke off, and went to save Champlin. Now here's where everything goes wrong. Tommy McGuire still had those drop tanks attached to his plane. He still hadn't jettisoned them. And now he was throwing his P-38 into violent maneuvers trying to get into position to help Champlin. He came screaming in from the side, trying to get a shot at the Japanese fighter that was chasing his wingman, but his plane was sluggish. It wasn't responding the way it should. The extra weight, the extra drag, it was making everything harder. He was pulling G's, turning tight, trying to line up his shot. And then, it happened. His plane stalled. For those of you who don't know
Stall it's when an aircraft loses lift and stops flying. The wings can't generate enough airflow to keep the plane in the air, and when you're low and slow and pulling hard G's in combat, a stall is a death sentence. Tommy McGuire's P-38 rolled over, nose down, and started falling. He was too low, maybe 200 feet above the jungle canopy. There was no time to recover, no time to regain control, no time to do anything. His plane smashed into the jungle at full speed. The impact was catastrophic. The P-38 disintegrated, fire and debris scattered across the trees, and just like that, Tommy McGuire was gone, America's second highest scoring ace, 38 confirmed kills, 24 years old, dead, not because he was shot down, not because he was outflown, but because he refused to jettison his drop tanks, because he wanted to stay in the air longer, because he wanted to help his friend. The other pilots saw it happen. They heard the radio go silent. They saw the smoke rising from the jungle below. Captain Weaver took command of the flight and ordered everyone to break off and head home. There was nothing they could do. Tommy was gone. The news hit the squadron like a bomb. Nobody could believe it. Tommy McGuire, invincible Tommy McGuire, was dead. They sent search teams into the jungle, but they couldn't recover his body. The crash site was too remote, too dangerous. Still in contested territory, it would be months before they could bring him home. His mother Polly received the telegram a few days later, the one that every military family dreads. The Secretary of War desires me to express his deep regret. Her son, her brilliant, ambitious, driven son, was never coming home. But here's the thing, here's what makes this story so heartbreaking and so powerful at the same time. Tommy McGuire didn't die for nothing. His sacrifice, his decision to help his wingman instead of saving himself, it meant something. Second Lieutenant Fred Champlin, the pilot Tommy was trying to save. He made it home. He survived the war. He lived a full life. He got to see his family again, got to grow old, got to tell his children and grandchildren about the day Tommy McGuire gave his life so that he could live. And the military recognized what Tommy had done. On May 8th, 1946, over a year after his death, President Harry Truman awarded Thomas McGuire Jr. the Medal of Honor, the highest military decoration in the United States. The citation read, "He saw a fellow fighter pilot being attacked by an enemy aircraft and immediately went to his assistance. With complete disregard for his own safety, he engaged the enemy in combat. During the ensuing action, his aircraft was seen to crash into the jungle. Major McGuire's daring and selfless action in attempting to save a fellow pilot cost him his life, but exemplified the highest traditions of military service." They named an Air Force base after him, McGuire Air Force Base in New Jersey. It's still there today. Every pilot who trains there, every airman who serves there, they learn about Tommy McGuire. They learn about the kid from New Jersey who became one of the greatest fighter pilots in American history, who racked up 38 confirmed
kills, who flew mission after mission into deadly combat, and who ultimately died because he valued his brothers in arms more than his own life. There's a monument at the base, a statue of Tommy standing next to a P-38 Lightning, and there's a plaque with his Medal of Honor citation. Every year on January 7th, they hold a memorial service. They remember what he did. They remember what he sacrificed. Because Tommy McGuire's story isn't just history. It's a lesson about loyalty, about courage, about the cost of doing the right thing even when the right thing might kill you. Think about it. He was 2 kills away from being the top American ace of World War II. His name would have been first in the history books instead of second. He would have been the legend instead of just a legend. All he had to do was focus on himself, stay aggressive, hunt for kills, ignore everything else. But when his wingman called for help, he didn't think about records or glory or history. He thought about his friend. He thought about the guy who was about to die unless someone helped him, and he made his choice. Now here's the part that haunts people who study this story. The investigators, the people who analyzed the crash, they all came to the same conclusion. If Tommy McGuire had jettisoned his drop tanks, he probably would have survived. His plane would have been lighter, more maneuverable, more responsive. He could have made that turn. He could have avoided the stall. He could have saved Champlin and himself. And he knew that. He was an experienced pilot. He'd flown hundreds of combat missions. He knew the rules. He knew what those drop tanks were doing to his aircraft performance. But he made a calculated decision to keep them on. And when the moment came, when he needed every ounce of performance his plane could give, they killed him. Some people say it was pilot error, that he made a stupid mistake and paid the price. But the people who knew him, the pilots who flew with him, they say it was exactly the opposite. Tommy McGuire knew exactly what he was doing. He knew the risks. He made his choice. And he lived and died by that choice. That's not error. That's not stupidity. That's sacrifice. That's what real courage looks like. Not the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite the fear, to put someone else's life above your own, to do the right thing even when you know it might cost you everything. Fred Champlin. The pilot Tommy saved. He carried that weight for the rest of his life. In interviews years later, he would talk about January 7th, 1945, about hearing Tommy's plane crash, about knowing that Tommy died trying to save him. He said he thought about it every single day, every birthday, every Christmas, every moment with his wife and kids. He knew he only had those moments because Tommy McGuire gave up his moments. That's a heavy thing to carry. But Champlin also said this. Tommy was the bravest man I ever knew, not because he wasn't afraid, but because he didn't let fear stop him from doing what was right. He could have left me, he could have saved himself, but that wasn't who he was. He was a fighter, but more than that, he was a brother, and brothers don't leave. That right there, that is the heart of this story. Because World War II produced a lot of heroes, a lot of brave men and women who did extraordinary things, but Tommy McGuire's story stands out because it's so pure. There's no ambiguity, no moral greyness, just a simple, clear choice, save yourself or save your friend, and he chose his friend, knowing it would probably kill him. The P-38 Lightning he was flying that day, it's never been recovered, it's still out there somewhere, buried in the jungle on Negros Island. Over the decades there have been expeditions to try to find it, to bring back pieces, to create a proper memorial, but the jungle is thick, the terrain is brutal, and after almost 80 years, nature has reclaimed everything. Tommy McGuire's final resting place is somewhere in that green hell, lost, forgotten by everyone except the people who study history and the families who remember. His mother Polly never really recovered from losing him. She lived until 1979, 34 years after her son's death, and people who knew her said she never stopped grieving. She kept his room exactly the way it was. She kept his medals and photographs and letters on display. She would tell stories about him to anyone who would listen, about what a good boy he was, how smart, how ambitious, how much he loved flying, and how he died a hero. She was so proud of him, but that pride didn't fill the hole in her heart. Richard Bong, the pilot whose record Tommy was chasing, he died too, less than a year after Tommy, August 6, 1945, test flying a P-80 jet fighter in California, engine failure on takeoff. He crashed and burned, never even made it into combat again. The two greatest American aces of World War II, both dead before they turned 25, both killed by the machines they loved. It makes you think about the cost of war, not just the strategic cost or the political cost, but the human cost. All that talent, all that potential, all those years they should have had, just gone. Tommy McGuire should have come home. He should have married his girlfriend Marilyn. He should have finished his engineering degree. He should have had kids and grandkids and a long, happy life. But that's not how it worked out. Instead, he's frozen in time forever. 24 years old, America's second greatest fighter ace, the man who chose loyalty over survival. There's a phrase in military culture, no one left behind. It's a sacred principle. You don't abandon your brothers, you don't leave wounded on the battlefield, you bring everyone home, or you die trying. Tommy McGuire lived that principle, he embodied it, and on January the 7th, 1945, he proved it, with his life. Modern fighter pilots study his missions, they analyze his tactics, they learn from his successes and his mistakes. But the lesson that resonates most, it's not about angles of attack or energy management or gunnery skills, it's about character. About being the kind of person who doesn't hesitate when someone needs help, who doesn't calculate the odds or weigh the risks, who just acts because it's the right thing to do. That's what makes Tommy McGuire a hero. Not his 38 kills, not his Medal of Honor, not his place in the history books, but his choice. The choice he made in that moment when everything was on the line. So what would you do? If you were in that cockpit, if you heard your wingman screaming for help, if you knew that going to save them might kill you, what would you do? It's easy to say you'd be brave. It's easy to imagine yourself making the heroic choice when you're safe on the ground reading a story. But up there, in the chaos and the fear and the violence of aerial combat, when your own survival instincts are screaming at you to run, to save yourself, to let someone else be the hero, that's when you find out who you really are. Tommy McGuire found out who he was. And what he found, what he proved, was that he was the kind of man who would rather die than abandon a friend. That's rare. That's special. That's the kind of courage that deserves to be remembered forever. His name is carved into monuments. It's written in history books. It's taught at military academies. But more than that, it's carried in the hearts of the people who understand what he did, who understand that sometimes the most heroic thing you can do is the thing that kills you. And you do it anyway, because that's what heroes do. They don't count the cost. They don't measure the risk. They see someone who needs help, and they help, no matter what. January 7th, 1945. The skies over Negros Island. Tommy McGuire's P-38 Lightning falling from the sky. In those final seconds, as his plane rolled and dove and the jungle rushed up to meet him. What was he thinking? Was he scared? Was he angry? Did he regret his choice? We'll never know. But I like to think, I choose to believe, that in those final moments, Tommy McGuire felt at peace. Because he'd done the right thing. He'd saved his friend. He'd lived up to everything he believed in. And if that meant giving his life, then so be it. That's the price. That's the cost. And Tommy McGuire paid it. In full. His story is a reminder. In a world that often celebrates selfishness and ambition and looking out for number one, Tommy McGuire reminds us that there's something more important, something greater. Loyalty, brotherhood, sacrifice, the willingness to put someone else's life above your own. That's what it means to be a hero. Not the medals or the glory or the recognition, but the choice. The hard choice. The choice that might cost you everything, and the willingness to make that choice. Anyway, Tommy McGuire made that choice, and he paid the ultimate price. But because of him, Fred Champlin lived, and that pilot went home to his family, and he had children, and those children had children, and all of those lives, all of that love and happiness and experience, it only exists because Tommy McGuire chose to be a hero. So the next time you're faced with a choice between doing what's easy and doing what's right, between looking out for yourself and looking out for someone else, remember Tommy McGuire. Remember the kid from New Jersey who became America's second greatest fighter ace, who flew his P-38 Lightning into combat mission after mission, who racked up 30 barn, 8 confirmed kills, who was 2 victories away from being number one, and who threw it all away to save a friend. That's the story. That's the truth. That's what real courage looks like, and that's why, almost 80 years later, we still tell his story. We still remember his name. We still honor his sacrifice, because heroes like Tommy McGuire, they don't come along very often. And when they do, we need to remember them. We need to tell their stories. We need to make sure that what they did, what they gave, is never forgotten. Rest in peace, Tommy McGuire. You were a legend, you were a hero, and you were a friend, and that's worth more than any record, more than any medal, more than anything else in this world.